Uttarakhand's Kumaon region isn't exactly one you'd label as unexplored. The likes of Nainital, Bhimtal and surrounding hill stations have been quite popular with tourists, especially from the northern parts of India. But there are several aspects most tourists who head to the region to answer the call of the mountains tend to overlook pertaining to the history of the region, the well-preserved colonial architecture, as well as stories that have been passed on from one generation to the other. Our journey to the Kumaon region with the Hyundai venue IMT took us to some fascinating places. Places steeped in history, some famous, some not so much. Along some of Uttarakhand's most famous lakes and of course off the beaten path in search of some good driving roads. We'd heard from reliable sources that if colonial era architecture is what you want to check out, then Satyal is a pretty good bet. Much of the 100 to 150 year old examples of British era architecture have been preserved quite well in this region. Just off the main road leading down to the lake, a narrow trail leads to the Christian ashram. Originally part of a tea estate dating back to 1860, the land was donated to Eli Stanley Jones, an American Christian missionary who had the Christian ashram built. The ashram continues to attract visitors from across the globe. Aside from that, there are several other examples of colonial architecture in the ashram's vicinity, including a small church along the unpaved trail leading up to the main road. The St. John's Church, as it is called, has a very Welsh influence seen in its construction, owing to the primarily Welsh populace settled in these parts during the British rule. Our journey to the mountains was, at the core of it, a road trip, and finding great driving roads was high on the agenda. The 24-kilometer long stretch connecting Bhimtal and Nainital did serve up some fun and incredible views, but with the Uttarakhand government doing away with travel restrictions, traffic was heavier than anticipated as our fellow city dwellers made a beeline for the mountains to shake off lockdown blues. Mildly disappointed, we set out in search for the proverbial road less travelled, relatively speaking of course. Mercifully, the road leading to Oklahanda rewarded us with beautiful tarmac, some splendid views and best of all, little to no traffic. Playing its part was a Hyundai venue with its IMT that isn't just a cost-effective way of ditching the clutch, but also gives you the joy of shifting through a manual gearbox, letting the driver dictate shifts instead of relying on, say, an automatic that can at times prove bothersome with ill-timed shifts. One of the defining aspects of the Kumaon region, especially in the context of tourism, is the presence of lakes nestled in the mountains. The presence of these lakes has earned Kumaon the tag of Lake District of India. Among the prominent ones is Nainital. Banks of the Nainital are lined with hotels and restaurants, and its popularity has risen over the years, especially amongst those looking to get away from the more popular and consequently more crowded Nainital, which is perhaps one of the most, if not the most popular destinations in the region. Nainital too has its fair share of colonial era architecture, and one of the finest examples is St. John's Church in the wilderness. This church came up in 1846 and is one of the earliest buildings in Nainital and is a very traditional English church in the way it has been constructed. Nestled between tall deodar and pine trees, the church, in stark contrast to the unending hustle and bustle of Nainital, has a very peaceful and tranquil ambience. Its neo-Gothic architecture attracts architects seeking to better understand this style. We'd highly recommend paying St. John's in the wilderness a visit the next time you're in Nainital. Nainital is also where we wrapped up the first leg of our journey exploring the Kumaon region, at yet another fine example of colonial era architecture. But this one was perhaps a bit more special, more noteworthy than the ones we'd seen so far, as it belonged to one of Uttarakhand's most famous residents. But to find out more about it, about the place and to whom it belonged, and for more lakes, roads and breathtaking scenery, watch out for the second part of the story. So subscribe and click on that bell icon to get notified the moment part 2 goes live.